Interested in learning about wine, but not sure where to start? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. I'm your host, Haley Bowman, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm a wine enthusiast turned wine educator and founder of the Seattle-based wine tasting business, Cork and Fizz. It is my goal to build your confidence in wine by making it approachable and lots of fun. You can expect to learn everything from how to describe your favorite wine to what to pair with dinner tonight, and so much more. Whether you're a casual wine sipper or a total cork dork like myself, this podcast is for you. So grab yourself a glass and let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. Today, you'll be listening to part 2 of my interview with Amy Yancey. If you haven't heard part 1 yet, I highly recommend pause this episode, go listen to episode 170. I will be here when you get back. As a reminder, Amy is a certified sommelier and the founder of Pocket Somm. She started working the floor as a wine director, but after being diagnosed with a rare degenerative eye disease, Amy had to step back from restaurant service and build her own path in wine. Now she's helping people discover thoughtfully made wines through education, storytelling, and her wine club. She has a unique perspective on how we experience wine, and I'm really excited to share the second half of this conversation with you. In this episode, we'll talk more about why Amy prefers the word agrarian over natural or organic or biodynamic, how to hunt down under-the-radar wines, or maybe what you'd call hidden gems. She also shares more about grower champagne and why she loves it so much, and we get to learn a little bit. I learned something new from her in that sense. And of course, so much more. Let's get into it. Okay, you used the word, so we've talked a little bit natural, organic, biodynamic, but like you said, you like to use the word agrarian. Did I say that right?
Yeah, just like agriculture.
Yes. So why is it that, what's the difference between those two, and why is it that you focus more on agrarian versus like natural or biodynamic?
Well, biodynamic is just one farming practice. And then, because I really love regenerative farming practices, bedrock out of California or regenerative farming. I don't know how much you know about that one, but I feel like you're seeing that all over California, and that's all about carbon sequestration and microorganisms in the soil and the way that you're farming. And it's like no-till, polyculture. There's no one-size-fits-all checklist for being a well-made and organically farmed wine or, winery. And I don't like to put people in like boxes. And so natural wine is kind of becoming this catch-all. But I feel like natural wine has been taken by the community of winemakers that make wine almost like beer, and they have a lot of volatile acidities and a lot of funkiness. And some people call them flaws. I don't really care about the people's definition. You like what you like, But I feel like sometimes natty wine is now coming that you think it's going to be like a pet nat that kind of tastes like kombucha. And so a lot of the wines that I focus on, they taste more like traditional wines than they do natural, quote unquote, wines. And there's a lot of tiny generational estates that practice flawless chemical-free farming, but aren't calling it biodynamic. Biodynamic's almost like a religion. So yeah, I focus on wineries. They don't have to follow like a certain, they don't have to call it anything. You can kind of just tell by the way that they treat their plants, treat their farmers, treat their land, not using synthetic chemicals, not purchasing inoculated BM45 yeast to make it taste spicy and jammy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like they're making wine as it's always been made in a sense, and they're not trying to force it to do a certain thing. They're like, this is what the grapes did. And the one thing too that I love talking to winemakers about, and they're like, I might sometimes have to do something to like help with the wine that year, or something went weird in the vineyards or something, and I got to step in a little bit. And like that to me is always like, that just makes sense. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. They can't just like throw out their whole crop because something went wrong.
I 100% agree. And to me, there's like a pendulum, right? Of like the way it swings from like completely like, we're not even going to make the wine, and the wine is just going to do its own thing. Like, I don't know if you've had any of the High-U Wine Farm wines, and Nate Reddy, I think he's a genius in a way, or the very, very like recipe of the wine. So it tastes the same every single year. So there's somewhere in between, but I tend to lean in that pendulum swing of, and you can call it organic, you can call it sustainable, as long as you're trying, we're not spraying synthetic chemicals out of airplanes,
Yeah. Just a quick reminder, if you are not on my mailing list yet, What are you waiting for? I would love for you to join. When you do, you'll get a free shopping guide that has 15 of my favorite wines under $15. Head to corkandfizz.com, scroll down to the bottom, and there'll be a little section where you can join the mailing list. I send out a weekly newsletter filled with wine tips, recommendations, special offers, and so much more. Now, let's get back to the show. Okay, what about, I just want to, before we go too far away from Pocket Somm and the wine club, can you talk a little bit logistics? How often do people get wine, or what are their options? How many bottles? How can people, what does it look like for them if they want to join?
So I have a wine subscription where you get it every month, but on every time you go to the website, you can just do a one-time purchase. So if you ever wanted to send one of the club memberships as a gift. So I have three tiers really. The first one is a mix selection, and it's usually like a white, a sparkling, a red. Sometimes it's a rosé, red and white. Sometimes, but it's some sort of like mix selection. It's 3 bottles for $120 a month, and they are, high quality organic wines. And then I have a pick 6, so it's the same thing. It's just more wine. And then I have a mixed reds where it's all red. And then I have Special Club, which is all champagne. So a 3 or 6 on the champagnes as well.
Nice. Okay, you mentioned with champagne, just real fast, what is a grower champagne for folks that don't know what that means?
Yeah, so traditionally, the Champagne region had a lot of growers. There is a lot of small estates in Champagne, and you can't really make a large commercial product by yourself. So there will be a large champagne house, and they will work with maybe 100 grower partners, maybe 50 grower partners, maybe 300 grower partners, depending. And they take all of those grower partners' wines and they bring them back to their large house, and then they blend them to get a consistent taste. And then each large house, like Boulanger or Taittinger or Krug or Dom Perignon, whoever it is, Moet and Chandon, Veuve Clicquot, all of those are kind of larger brands. They each have a consistent style. So one might be purchasing Chardonnay, like Ruinart, for example, probably has like 70 Chardonnay grower partners. A grower champagne is just one of those partners making their own champagne. So there are 5 different and unique subregions in Champagne, and they each have different grapes that they specialize in, different terroirs, mountains, rivers, valleys, some are more clay, some are more Kimmeridgian limestone, some is pure white bedrock. So it's kind of interesting. Champagne is like just saying you're drinking wine from California. If it was just blended from all over California. And grower champagne is having a single state from Sonoma. So having a single estate from the Montagne de Rhum, and that's, mainly Pinot Noir, or coming down into the Val de la Marne and having the grape Meunier from Clay. There's 9 authorized grapes in Champagne, and I like to try them all by themselves. I like to have 1 or 2 of them blended. I like to try them from different sites, different aspects, different people, different winemaking, stainless steel versus barrel fermentation. They all come to a different flavor, and I, like Pokemon, want to try them all. And
I
so my
love that.
club, if you also want to try them all, my club is a good way to start because I put, champagne is not cheap, unfortunately. So that is my more expensive tier. And I don't want to give you just entry level, $30, $40 bottles of champagne. It's $300 a month for 3 nice grower champagnes. Sometimes you might have like a $60 bottle, but then you'll have like a $140 bottle in there kind of thing, And yeah, I'm just introducing you to my favorite producers from my favorite places and then telling you all about them
Oh,
in my audio
okay.
guides.
2 more questions on the champagne. I'm sorry. I hope this
Oh,
isn't
we
like
can talk
I'm like
about
quizzing
champagne
you on
all
champagne.
day.
I'm just so curious. First, you mentioned there are 9 grapes
Mm-hmm.
that are allowed in champagne. So I've always been familiar with like Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, Chardonnay. What are the other grapes?
Well, that's like saying like the only grapes of Burgundy are Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. We got Gamay and Beaujolais, you have Sauvignon Blanc and Saint Brie, you have Aligoté and all over, but mainly Bouzeron. So when you first start learning about wines, and I teach this way too, like when I start teaching, there's 3 grapes, but it's just the foundational blocks of knowledge. There's more grapes in almost all of the regions than the WSET and Court teaches you, but that's what you need to know at first. And Pinot Noir and Chardonnay are the dominant grapes of large houses, but I don't really focus on large houses. I focus on all the little growers. So depending on where you are. So, oh my God, let's see if I can do it all 9. So Meunier, by the way, Pinot Noir, Pinot Blanc, and Pinot Grigio are all genetic mutations of the same Pinot grape. They previously thought Meunier was. It's not. Pinot has been dropped from Meunier. So it's just Meunier now.
Oh, okay.
Kind of like Melon de Bourgogne. Ain't from de Bourgogne. It's
Sure.
just
So they just because they just had that new thing that now it's called Melon because they can't call it Melon de Bourgogne because it was confusing people and they had the whole like
yeah,
lawsuit or whatever
Merlot in
about it.
Chile is actually just Carbonara. Yeah. Genetic testing. Thank you, UC Davis. But yes, so Meunier used to not be talked about. There's somewhat of a renaissance. I would say Meunier is probably my favorite grape. And remember, all grape juice is clear. And what Champagne is really known for is the fractional blending of taking Pinot Noir, a black grape, and taking Meunier, a black grape, squeezing white grape juice from it, and blending it with the white grape juice from Chardonnay. So fun. Thanks, Dom Perignon. Because that's really what his contribution is, this fractional blending system of white wines from red and white grapes. So if you ever see on a champagne label Blanc de Noir, means you're drinking a white wine from red grapes. And you're seeing more these days little play on that, and they're calling it Blanc de Meunier. And it's white wines made from the Meunier grape. And those are my absolute favorite. I think I've put 100% Meunier in every box. Actually, one was a Rosé de Sagny Meunier, but still 100% Meunier because it's so approachable in youth. Champagne, you need so much time. Grower champagne is kind of like vintage port where it's released immediately. They don't age it for you. Where like a lot of the big houses, especially the Tête de Cuvées, are aged for you for like 10 years, you know? These wines, you got to take the babies home. I always tell people, like, if I'll see them opening some like Cedric Bouchard, like RDJ, like the current release, I'm like, stop killing that baby. Like, hold it. Like, you have to get it to the point where you have like, 4 or 5 vintages of the wine. And I know that's like super annoying, but I try to help people out with that. Building a little collection, not Barolo where it's like 35 years you got to wait for it, or Bordeaux, but there should be a couple, and even like with grower champagne, sometimes even like 6 months of holding a bottle before you pop it. But that's not the case to me with Meunier. It's really, really approachable right out of the bottle. But the other ones, so you have Petit Meslier, you have Arbein, you have Fermentu or Pinot Grigio, Pinot Gris. They're doing a testable wine called Voltus right now. It's not an actual approved grape, but they are seeing how it will go for the next 10 years. Chardonnay Rose is now a 100% approved champagne grape. You're starting to see that on Burgundy, like Sylvain Paté. Oh, I love their Chardonnay Rose. It's just a pink skin variant. It's interesting that they're calling it Chardonnay Rose because it's the Gris, Pinot Grigio is a pink
Yeah,
skin
why are they
variant.
making another word that means the same thing?
I don't know, but I like it better.
You're just
I'm
gonna
gonna
start
start calling it
Pinot Gris,
Pinot
Pinot Rose.
Rose.
Like Rose and Gris, they're the same thing. I'm just gonna use Rose from now on.
Grenache Rose.
Yeah, there you go.
Jolie Lay Trousseau Rose. I'm writing Scott a letter. Yeah, there's one. I'm missing one. Petit Meslier, Arbein, Pinot Gris.
It's all right. The folks listening probably won't know. I was just
Pinot
honestly
Blanc.
curious. Pinot Blanc. There we go.
Thank you. Sorry. I
No,
had to
that's
get
okay.
it. Well,
I
because you
was
have
very
like, if you want to try to find it, they're called the heirloom varieties. If you think about like phylloxera, after all the fires in like any town, like the Chicago fire, to rebuild, I kind of feel that way about phylloxera. And they had to replant. And so when they replanted, they mainly replanted Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. But there are still a lot of pockets. And La Herte Ferrer does a Les Seven. Because Voltus and Chardonnay Rose are within the last decade, and the 7 have been there since forever.
okay.
And so La Herte Ferrer does one that has all 7. That's, not a commercial brand, but I feel like you can get La Herte Ferrer in almost any market. Etienne Calsac does one called Revenance that's very hard to find, but delicious. Tarlant does a BAM, Pinot Blanc, Arbein, Petit Meslier, BAM.
Ah, smart.
Now that you know it, you'll start seeing them. It's like sometimes once you realize something, then you'll start seeing it everywhere.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that was me when I was pregnant. I was like, why is everyone pregnant all of a sudden? Like, as soon as
Funny.
I like it better when it's on the wine side. Okay, and then the other question I had about champagne before we dig into the other stuff about producers, why is champagne so expensive?
I think there's a return on investment. Like, think about Prosecco. You're making it, you're growing it, pressing it, 1 fermentation, 2 fermentation, tank, chill for a second on lees, bottle market. Champagne has that, for minimum, I think 15 months is like what you got to study, 15, 18 months. And then most producers do 2 years. And then a lot of the producers that I sell are more like 4, 5, 8 years in the cellar on lees, getting all of those fun autolytic characters. Because the longer a wine stays in, there's 2 ways. There's the longer the wine stays in contact with the lees, it gets creamier. And then it depends on the reserve wine. Because remember, the base wine, pre-fermentation of champagne, there's a million different choices that you can make, and how far back your reserve wine goes to blend into it. The older the reserve wine, obviously, the more complex and rich. And you see a lot of growers who have like a Solera, like Pierre Peters or Dahan Grille have Soleras that like a perpetual reserve, we'll call it, not a Solera, a perpetual reserve. So a barrel that they've been adding fresh wine and taking wine to bottle since the 80s goes into each one of their newer vintages in their blend. And so I forgot the question. I'm
No,
sorry.
that's okay. This is so cool. And for folks listening, I know like a lot of this, there's a lot of information to know of like, so with champagne, when you're making champagne, you generally like, it's often there's no year on it because it's a non-vintage because you're blending multiple years, right? And that's kind of what
Yeah.
you're talking about, where you're making
With
the
that
wine for
one in
that
particular,
year.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you can have ones that have,
A lot of grower champagnes are in a vintage. I think that's another part of champagne. It's like
interesting.
grower champagne in particular. It's like, this is this vintage, this grape, this parcel, this, this hillside. And so, but yeah, why is champagne so expensive is because it takes all of that. You are blending wines. Usually with champagne, you have a non-vintage, like an entry-level price point wine, and you get into their more site-specific or vintage wines from there. And different cuvées, sometimes they plant, 4 of the 9 varieties, and then they make 100%, like Flavian Nowak, for example, will do 100% Chardonnay, 100% Meunier. They vinify them all separately. But there's just a lot more cost that goes into champagne. There's a lot more winemaking. We talk about natural wine, like champagne is not a natural wine, but I tend to like champagnes when you're, the liquor de garage, when you're listening to the winemaker talk and they're like, oh, we're actually using our own great must and natural yeast to restart fermentation instead of beet sugar and inoculated yeast. And a lot of grower champagnes are not adding any dosage. That's a little bit because of the warming of the growing season, but also palates liking drier and drier champagne. People think brut just means sparkling wine. Brut just means how much sugar was added to a very acidic beverage to balance it. And usually the sugar in brut is undetectable.
Right, right. Even though there is it's not the lowest amount of sugar. They do actually have to add sugar because it is so acidic. It would
Or
be a
just to
little
add texture, because I feel like it depends too, because sometimes I swear I get like a brut nature wine. I'm like, this would be so cool with like 3 grams of dosage. But, each person, it's a stylistic choice. It's an artist choice. I'm not going to critique an artist. I may or may not like it, but it is still their art. And so I try to evaluate most wine that's made artistically and not just, it depends on like, I feel like a lot of like talking about like the ethos of the wine is, why are you making this wine? Like I remember talking to this one winemaker who had moved into Happy Canyon, and he was like, it was all planted to like Dolcetto and Zinfandel from the 1800s. And I was like, so you ripped it all up and planted Cabernet? He was like, yeah. And then put it in 200% new French oak. And now it's, $90 a bottle wholesale. Would you like to buy this? And I'm like, put it on the list at the steakhouse. I'm just kidding. That's kind of what I'm anti these days. I would be more interested in just trying what was, you know,
yeah.
on the hillside before, maybe done in like a lower alcohol, high acid, had it with some charcuterie.
Yes. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the producers and like how you pick out wines to go in the box. So, when you're, meeting a producer or talking to the folks trying to sell you the wine, what tells you that they're, genuinely farming with a purpose versus, just marketing a story or trying to tell you, because they know what you're looking for?
A little bit of experience. I mean, I would say that most people don't. I don't really have a lot of sales reps that are like coming by and like introducing me to wine. I'm usually finding what I want from the reps, and a little bit of it's importers. I mean, I trust, you know, there are certain importers that I am more biased to or that I buy my wine from, like Skurnik or Louis Dresner, Rosenthal, Polliner, Calder, Kermit Lynch. I mean, there's a million of them. And I actually just know these people that are working for these companies that are going to the suppliers that are taking pictures of the wines or showing me like, oh, this is when I was at this winery. We met, like they're calling the winemakers by their first names. And a little bit of it's just winery reputation. Everyone knows that like Steve Mathiasen is like one of the best, organic wine farmers in the valley. And so it's not that I don't trust all wine, but like usually if somebody presented me with like a list of wines I did not know and I'd never heard of, and I didn't have the ability to fact check those, I usually tend to stick to wines that like I know fairly well, that I've tasted, that I've drank, and that I, by proxy of other people's reputation that I trust. And a lot of that is trusting the brokers or the importers.
Right, because of course the way that the wine system works or the alcohol system works here in the US is that in order to get it to you, the nice thing is, so I guess that benefits for you of like, you can trust that importer, which is something I've been telling folks as well when they're just buying wine regularly. Like, if it's a wine from outside of the US, flip that wine label over and look for the importer. If you like that wine, there's a good chance you'll like other wines by that importer, and you kind of get the benefit of now trusting those folks so you don't have to like start from scratch.
Yeah, for sure. I'll be at, like, a wine shop and, like, I might not know every wine, and I'm like, "Oh, what's the Spanish wine?" I flip it over and see, like, Jose Pastor. I'm like, "Score! I'm buying this," or, like, Ron Bowden, and there's so many great importers. So, yes, I 100% agree with what you just said, and I usually give people, like, a pocket list of importers, but I like what you said better. Like, if you like something, well, then go try to find something else by that wine, or just call me and let me find it for you and ship it
Yes,
to
that works too.
you.
That's what sommeliers are for. They're literally like your
On your
personal
pocket.
shoppers that will help
No,
you
I
shop and
yes. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. I mean, even if you do sign up for my wine club, the first thing I do is send you an email being like, "Here's my cell phone, like, call me, beat me, whatever you need. If you have a certain wine that you're looking for, I can usually find it, even if it doesn't come through me." Like, there was somebody that was looking for a specific champagne that this I know that Terry Feast brings it in, but I couldn't find it for them. I tried, like, every market, and I ended up just finding it on Thatcher and seeing them the link and be like, "I got it for you." Like, it doesn't have to they support my business in so many other ways. Like, if there's a certain producer that you're looking for, I can usually find it and not have to do that crazy gray market pricing for it.
yes. Okay, here's a question I'm not sure. Hopefully this kind of makes sense. If you gave your wine club members or even just folks who are shopping your wine a treasure map for finding amazing wines, what
Ooh.
clues would be on it? Wait, I know you think this is an ad, but it's not, so don't hit skip. I have a small favor to ask. Here's the truth. I will never charge you to listen to this show, but every episode takes time and money to create. So if this podcast has helped you pick a better bottle, learn something new, or just kept you company, would you consider becoming a paid subscriber? You can show your support for just $3, $5, $8, or $10 a month. To say thanks, every single supporter gets a shout out on the next episode I record. And if you choose the $10 tier, you actually get to pick a future episode topic. Setting up a subscription is a great way to show your love for the show. Just click the link in the description right now. Thank you for listening, supporting, and being part of my wine loving community. Now let's get back to the show.
Bodies of water, coastlines, mountain ranges, rivers, cool climates. Yeah, smaller places, not too like there's a ton of commercial wineries in that area, then typically there's gonna be what I mean? So,
Yes.
like, finding wine region like and I love Napa Valley, don't get me wrong, but, like, look at the Willamette Valley versus Napa Valley as far as, like, amount of organic farms versus non-organic farms. Like, when you go to Oregon, you can't, like, throw a stone without hitting a biodynamic farm because that area was and I feel that way a lot about regions in France and Spain, but, like, Cava, like, Penedès versus, going up the coast a little bit to, like, Emporta on the coast of France and getting a coastal sparkling wine from Emporta versus something from the kind of sprawling, larger Cavadio. So,
Interesting. Okay, I like that. So basically, if you're hearing folks talk about it, if you're looking to buy a wine and they're talking about where the wine is from and they mention it's on the coast, it's near the mountains or up in the mountains, you're like, heck yeah, you should be that's a wine that you're at
yes,
least like listening
take
in
me
to
there.
learn more about.
Mhm. If you've never heard of the grape, try it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and then how do you, help folks hunt down, you're talking about these under the radar cult allocations. First of all, what do you mean by that? And how do you help them hunt those down without spending hundreds of dollars?
Well, it depends on who your producer is, like, who you're looking for. Like, I would consider, like, Invinite to be kind of a cult wine or Arnott Roberts. And those wines aren't stocked everywhere, but we have access to them. And while, like, I think the Arnott Roberts Trout Gulch Chardonnay is probably one of the more expensive, their rosé hits the shelf at, like, $20. So when I say cult, I don't mean, like I said before, like, super high-end Salon, Salos, like I mean, well, I can find you those wines too, but I I what I more mean is just, like, really Luis Rodriguez, for example, or some of the Raul Perez wines, non-clary. There's singular, beautiful Albariños from Rias Baixas, and there's a bunch of different single vineyards, and they're kinda hard to find, and so, like, unless you know, and you have someone like me to track it down for you, it's hard to collect the different single vineyards of non-claries, but they're not more than like 30-40 bucks a bottle. It's just somebody has to introduce you to those wines, I believe, or at least I had to be introduced to those wines, and they're so good that I want to share them with my friends.
Yes. No, I think that you hit it right on the nail on the head on with like, you might not know that they exist, but let me help you find them is kind of the idea. So you could, if you're somebody who knows the producer that you're looking for, like you mentioned Raul Perez, and I'm like, oh yeah, give me all of his wine,
And this
please. Like
one's
I
so
want
like
all of them.
anything that he's even like anything that he's even a contractor on or like, a consultant winemaker on it. Like they're phenomenal. Like you might not have heard of Gadeo or even know how to say it or like be afraid of like even labels are difficult for me to read. So like I know that if it's somewhat intimidating for me, then it's gotta be for just someone who's getting into wine, know that they like wine. So I try to, be someone to bridge that gap. We'll figure it out together.
Yeah. And so I feel like you can both help with like when you have a producer in mind that you want to help find and get that. Or like you said, introduce folks to these wines that they're hard to find, but they're not super expensive and they're amazing. It's like those, not like the diamond in the rough necessarily, but just like hidden gems, maybe is a better
Hidden
word
gems,
for
yeah,
it.
maybe that
Yeah.
is maybe I'll change my website language because that's what my club is. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's what I'm putting in is the hidden gems. It's kind of funny. One of my favorite things, I get this feedback a lot. My little pocket Somm clients, especially the local ones that I introduce them to certain wines that they fall in love with. And then they're somewhere in a larger market at like a cool restaurant and they see it on the list. They get it so excited and they buy it. And then the sommelier like comes over and is like, who are you in the industry? Like, how do you know about this wine? And she's like, oh, I'm my best friend's a sommelier. You know what I mean? So my clients very much love being treated, even in Europe too. Like all my friends that go to Europe and buy great champagne, especially these like growers, always get treated really nice by the French sommeliers. And they always, they say, thank you so much for introducing me. Like everyone loved us because of the wines we ordered.
It's like your VIP ticket to the cool club.
Yeah. If that's the style that you like, I'm not judging. Like, I do not care if you only like super heavy, high alcohol, big, dry, like red wines from US or like Italy, but like I should be pretty clear, like that is not my club. Like you're gonna be trying wines like Trousseau and Mondouse and wines from the Jura and wines from Sicily and from the cooler parts in the coastal areas. The red grapes are usually spicy and earthy, but still light and have acid and are food wines. Like you gotta kind of like that has to sound interesting to you to really like, or you'd like white wine sparkling rosés because my club also has a lot of those. But even the red wine onlys, there'll be Riojas and there'll be Bordeaux's, but I try to stick to. I'm trying to like introduce you to something else. Like you can pretty much get Bordeaux, Rioja, Sangiovese, and Nebbiolo from anywhere, but can you try Alto Piemonte Nebbiolo from volcanic soils done by a multi-generational family like up in northern Italy. That's kind of what I do.
Yeah. All right. I have one last question before we get into. I have a little speed round that I end every podcast interview with. It's not like it's not like buzzer in and give your answer really fast. It's more like the questions you might have to like if you thought on them too much, it would take you too long. So it's just whatever comes to mind first. But before we get to that, what is a region or a grape right now that to you is outrageously good quality? It is like over delivering and it's still flying under the radar.
Yeah, white Meunier from Champagne. Seriously, I'm like obsessed. But Meunier champagnes, you can usually get them for under $70. They deliver like $200 bottles of champagne, and they're approachable in youth.
Nice. Will it say on the label that it's Meunier, or will you generally have to ask about it?
Mm, they usually have some sort of like I said, they'll say like Blanc de Meunier, or maybe the back would say 100% Meunier. I'm trying to think of how that's labeled. You might have to ask. Call
Yeah,
me. I'll find you some.
yeah, there you go. I love it. Okay, all right. So now, like I said, speed round. These are mainly just what is the first thing that comes to mind
Okay.
when I ask the question. So, for example, the first question is, what is your favorite wine at the moment?
I have so many. That's not fair. Honestly, 'cause I don't want to say it's so expensive, but fine, I will. It's the Brigitte and Michel Falon champagnes.
Okay, I love it.
They're not like approachable in price, but that is my favorite wine.
There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, how about a go-to bottle of wine to bring to like a dinner party or to share with friends?
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but I usually bring some sort of grower champagne. It really depends on the person. Like I had some friends that love red wine. I brought a magnum of Martin Woods Cabernet Franc from Columbia Valley. It's like where Washington and Oregon meet. But if it was deciding on me, it's gonna be some sort of grower champagne.
Yeah, I mean, be known as the grower champagne girl, and I'm sure you get invited to, like, every party.
It is my shtick, and if they're not that, honestly, if I like them, but, like, I don't wanna spend that much money, then it's some sort of, like, Cremant de Jura, Cremant de Loire, Cremant de Bourgogne, but something fun, like Tissot or Catherine in Breton, you know what I mean? Something culty, delicious, fun.
Okay, how about a favorite wine region that you've visited?
Champagne. Sorry.
Hey,
Gosh.
you gotta if you love something, you gotta shout it from the rooftop.
I know, I'm, like, kind of embarrassed, but it's true, it's like everyone knows this about me locally, so I guess know me on the podcast, that's who I am.
Okay, but how about the flip side of that is, what is a wine region that you've not been to that you'd like to
Ooh,
visit?
I really wanna do there's 2, Canary Islands,
Oh.
off the coast of West Africa. It'd be kinda cool to do Morocco and then go over to Canaries, but also the Basque in Spain, I would love to do coastal Spain in general, like, start in Barcelona, go up through the Basque, and finish in Galicia.
Yes, I've out of those, I've been to Barcelona and Galicia. Before I got into wine, unfortunately, it was, like, when I was studying abroad in college, but I do remember the wine there, and, oh, it was delicious with the
I
seafood.
studied abroad in college as well. I did the European Union because, I was
Oh,
that kind of
sure, yeah.
weird. And so, but I spent a lot of time in Paris and also in the Netherlands. But I was really into beer at that time. So I spent more time in the breweries and like doing beer stuff. And it's kind of funny, like looking like I lived there for an entire summer and I never really, I, the wine, it was lost on me. I was
Yep. I
20 years
ordered
old.
either vino blanco or vino vino rioja, like, it was not I did not know what I was getting. I was just like, "I'll have" and I was also under 21 at the time, so I couldn't
Yeah.
order wine at, at a, American restaurant, so I was just like, your house wine, that'll be great."
Yeah, for sure. I was under 21 too. So like I really but it's kind of interesting. My brother and his wife were both working in Michelin 3-star restaurants by the time I was 15. So I was very much introduced to cool, but my brother was really into beer, so I think that's where that he was always like this is a Trappist ale. And I remember going to like college parties like bringing my deliriums and no one would touch my beer. I'm like, good.
That's mine, I brought it for me to have at the party. Okay, how about a favorite wine and food pairing?
Probably sweet. Honestly, I love like Oloroso sherry and manchego cheesecake. I had that one time and it was like, oh, or just in general, like Vinsanto blue cheese. We had a really old Madeira with a Basque cake cheesecake with some crunchy stuff. If I had to do savory, I really, really love cool climate Syrah, like an Arnott Roberts or Pax or Pedriasasi with some sort of like charred octopus olive tapenade or like a seafood puttanesca. Like I love that combination of flavors.
Yum. Okay, I'm amazed you didn't say champagne and fried chicken. What's your champagne food pairing?
Well, because I would say something really snobby like caviar and bow rounds. I love to get the bow rounds. Do you have Bojangles in California? They have these like round, deep fried potato discs, and there's chopped
Ooh.
white onions in them. And then I like to get a little creme fraiche, just the regular accoutrements, caviar and champagne. It's kind of my shtick. I bring that to a lot of parties. Like I show up with the Bojangles bow rounds and the etc.
I love it. Okay. If you were given $1,000 and you have to spend it on wine, what would you buy? And you don't have to give me like specific bottles necessarily, but like how would
Any
you go about
money I
spending it?
ever make and spend on wine, it's gonna either get spent on Solos Ludies. Yeah, Solos Ludies, that's what I would say.
What is that grower champagne? What is Los
Yeah, it's a
Solis?
great yeah. Jacques Solos is a really beautiful champagne house, grower champagne house. Anselm is the winemaker there. He's pretty much mentored every grower champagne producer of note, and his wines are they're really autolytic. He uses VA in winemaking to make it like VA almost in the way that sherry has VA. So it's
Okay.
really, really toasty. They're really oxidative. I love oxygen in wine. That's why I love white Burgundy, but I honestly can't afford the white Burgundy that I love. Not yet. It's where pockets out.
And VA, volatile acidity, right? And then oxidation, the oxidative quality, what does that give to the wine?
Nutty hazelnut almond skin, this yeah, this richness, it's not even toastiness. I mean, it's definitely just like nuttiness, and I love those nutty flavors. And so the Ludi is basically a single parcel a lot of times in Champagne. So you have like a village, which is a larger area. And I think you can use Ludi as almost like a single parcel, but it's like you have a single vineyard, but then it's like a place within the vineyard. And
Okay.
so he has different Ludis from different Grand Crus, and they're quite expensive. And I've only been able to have like 3 or 4 of them and in a small amount. So I would love to that yeah, that would be the bottle I would. look
I
for.
love it. All right, last question with our speed run here. What is one wine myth that bugs you the most?
I guess that really expensive wine is worth like, and I say this mainly within red wines that are like thousands of dollars because of groupthink and because of marketing. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of marketing in wine that drives up price, and then there's a lot of scarcity that isn't scarce, you know? I think that's probably a myth. Like, oh, there was only this amount of this made, but like you chose that. And I feel that a lot with bourbon too. Like you could purchase as much corn as you want, you know what I mean? And so there's a lot of I hate being sold something that's like really scarce and it's like it's not scarce, but it's being told it is. Where there is certain places where it's like there just isn't any more of this property to make this wine. You know what I mean?
No, that makes sense. All right. Well, those are the end of my questions. Is there anything else that you want to share with listeners before we close up?
Well, just thank you so much for listening to my story. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can find me at Pocket Somm GVL. I'm, a small business owner, so I'm over here trying to do social media. And yeah, if you in any way want to get connected, feel free to email me, reach out. If you have a low vision or blind friend that needs some help and are struggling, please get them with me as well. I have a lot of support and contacts that help me get through the darkest period and then, not go on SSDI and be here and be thriving and being creative. So that's about it. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for having me, Haley.
Yeah, of course. And for everyone, all the links and everything will be in the show notes if you want to find Amy there. And then I will also share a discount code in the show notes as well if you want to check out her club and get, what is it, $15 off?
Yeah, it's $15 off your first subscription, but you're also welcome to always do a one-time purchase. A lot of people send my champagne club as like a gift. So if you
That's
just need like a
smart.
great high-end gift, it comes with, beautiful pockets on packaging and of course, tasting notes and audio guides about each champagne.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining, Amy.
Thanks, Haley. You're the best.
All right. Cheers. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. Be sure to check out Amy's website, pocketsommgvl.com, to learn more about her brand, Pocket Somm, and to join her wine club. If you join with a subscription, if you join her monthly wine club, be sure to use code CORKFIZZ, that's CORKFIZZ, no spaces, for $15 off your first order when you sign up for that club. If you loved this episode as much as I did and you haven't yet, please just take 10 seconds. Just open up your phone, go to whichever app you're listening to this on, and give it a rating. 5 stars would be most appreciated, but be honest, feel free. I'm tough. And of course, if you can leave a review, let me know what you liked about this episode, what you'd like to hear more of. Please jump in. I'd love to hear whatever you have to say. And if you want to show additional support for this show, you can become a paid subscriber. It's not this big thing. It is $10 or less a month, but it helps support the show and helps me keep up with the costs of making this. You can find the link in the show notes to become a monthly supporter. In next week's episode, I am going to be talking about underrated wines that you should be drinking. These are going to be wines like Muscadet, Lambrusco, Chenin Blanc, and so much more. I can't wait to share these fun wines with you. Thanks again for listening, and if you want to learn more about wine, come follow me at Cork and Fizz on Instagram. Cheers!